Good morning, world. It's about 5:45. Getting ready. Yeah, sorry. I had my brother's blankets on the couch here. Move that in a minute. But anyway, starting to get up earlier as the sun comes out. We're going to be getting up earlier, hitting up claims earlier, getting more done during the day. So sorry about that glare in your eyes. Just getting in the habit of getting up early now. Not quite at the time where I can be on my first roof at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, but only got a few more weeks, so I'm going to start getting in the habit of getting up now and getting ready to hit these claims early in the morning. With that, you guys have a great day. Just getting me a apple and an orange to start off the day with. I'm gonna get on the computer and do a few things before my first claim at, I think my first claim is 10 this morning. It did rain last night, so we're gonna give it an hour and a half to dry up after the sun comes out. I guess technically it's more than an hour and a half. See, the sun comes up about 7, so it doesn't really start getting warm till about 9. So yeah, about an hour. Let that roof dry off a bit, then jump on our first inspection. So hope you guys are doing great this morning. We'll chat with you in a little bit. Hey guys, I've actually been wanting to do this video for a while on the unfair claims practices. I brought it up in some of my other videos, but I'm pretty sure that most adjusters have never read these, even know what it's talking about. It's kind of this elusive act that we all know in the back of our minds, but we really don't know what's in it. So I was just going to read these off to you guys, give you my take on it. Again, a lot of these are ambiguous in some respects, so there's not a hard interpretation. A lot of these are going to be interpreted. If there's an issue in court, it's going to be interpreted in court. So you'll see what I mean here in a minute. But just some things for us to be aware of as we go about our claims. And yeah, so I'm going to get started here. So the unfair claims settlement practice. Now, a lot of these are similar in each state. These are the core. These are the core definitions that we're going over now, but each state is slightly different. So, you know, always check with your state's codes there. But anyways, A. Starting on here, A, knowingly misrepresenting to claimants and insureds relevant facts or policy provisions related to coverages at issue. So this has to do with either misrepresenting facts or not giving facts that the insured needs to file or get coverage for their claim. Now, how I interpret that, and some of you may not, is if I'm on an inspection and what I'm inspecting, let's say, the easiest thing to say is like, well, I'll give you an example. I actually had this the other day. So I was sent out to a house for a wind claim because the insured thought that the roof was leaking, and turned out that the roof wasn't leaking. And it was a water claim because the hot water tank was leaking. I had to crawl in the attic to find it. Now, some people have this idea, well, I came out here for wind, come out here for the hot water tank, so, you know, you have to file another claim. I don't believe that's true. I believe we just have to change the cause of loss on the claim being sent in, and possibly the date of loss if we can, and take care of the claim. right? Because the issue, the person's issue was the leak, was the water stains in the house. He thought it was the roof. So that's how he filed his claim. But in fact, it was a leaking hot water tank, okay? So just because they file a claim on a certain coverage, if they file it on the wrong coverage, we're not going to ignore what coverage it should go under. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Same thing for like wind and hail, right? So yeah, they filed a claim against wind, but you know, roof's not going to be bought for wind, but it could be bought for hail, or you know, a slope could be bought, or repairs could be made, right? So you can't just ignore it if you see it. If you see hail damage on a wind claim, you can't just ignore it altogether, okay? So that's how I take number 1 there. They have it listed as A. B, failing to acknowledge with reasonable promptness pertinent communications with respect to claims arising under its policies. All right, so this is basically once a claim is filed, there are, and again, this is done by state. A lot of states have a timeline that you have to follow as far as communications go. When you acknowledge you received the claim, and then this kind of ties into C here, which is failing to adopt and implement reasonable standards for prompt investigation and settlement of claims arising under its policies. So B is, hey, you have to recognize that a claim, you have to let the insured know that, hey, we recognize that you filed the claim. Throughout the claim, every time the insured sends in communications, there has to be a standard for which those communications are replied to. A lot of states will issue their own standards. But yeah, that's the big thing there. And then C, which is kind of tied into B there. Not only do we have to communicate, but then we have to investigate, and there has to be, you know, standards for a prompt investigation. And again, a lot of states will define, hey, this is what we determine as prompt investigation. You know, 2 weeks, 30 days, something like that. Okay. D, not attempting in good faith. That's the word you need to look at there. Good, or 2 words there. Good faith. Not attempting in good faith to effectuate prompt, fair, and equitable settlement of claims submitted in which liability has become reasonably clear. Okay. This is, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. I mean, it's once we realize that we owe for a claim, we have to do everything within our ability to make sure that we cover everything that needs to be covered so the insured can get their home back to what it was the day before the storm, right? Indemnification. So, in good faith means, you know, some of you guys that are deniers out there, you got to be careful with this. It means that we look for ways, oh, my screen just went down there. We have to think through the damages and make sure that we're thinking through what coverage actually needs to be made, okay? It's not just, well, here's how I've always done it, you know, and, you know, if you don't like the way that I do it and the contractor sends in his estimate and it's different, well, it's not my estimate, so I'm not using your estimate, right? That is not good faith, okay? You have to look through those estimates. You have to review them, and you have to see, all right, does this make sense? If you don't understand why a contractor or a PA has something on the claim, you got to call them and ask them, hey, can you explain this coverage for me? You don't just deny it up front. I guess that's what I'm getting to. Just because you've never seen it before, you have to, in good faith, determine if it's a reasonable charge, okay? You have to determine in good faith if it's a reasonable charge so you can have a fair, equitable settlement. Remember, you know, exactimate and stability, they are not the legal authority on what fair settlement is. They're just guidelines, right? They're just averages. So if a contractor submits an estimate and it's a little bit different, well, just because it's a little bit different doesn't mean that it's wrong or that you can't go with it. Maybe it's the exact same, but he's, you know, 5% higher. well, okay, well, that's reasonable, right? It's reasonable that that could be the cost of the repairs, okay? So you can just go with his estimate, okay? Next, E. This is where some of you guys get a little ornery on. Well, if you don't like my estimate, just get an appraiser, right? E. Compelling insureds or beneficiaries to institute suits to recover amounts due under its policies by offering less than the amounts ultimately recovered in suits brought against them. So you got to be careful with that attitude. If you don't like my estimate, just, you know, get a appraiser or sue us or whatever, you know. You can't do that. You got to be careful when you do that. That's not to say that you're not right in your estimate either, right? So just because the insured or the PA or the contractor have an estimate doesn't mean they're right. But it also doesn't mean that you're right. So you got to be able to kind of work through that. And you cannot have the attitude of, well, if you don't like what I put down, you know, go to an appraiser, or, you know, hey, you don't like what I put down, you can sue us or whatever. You're not allowed to do that. Okay? F. Refusing to pay claims without conducting a reasonable investigation. That's kind of self-explanatory. I don't know too many people that do that. You just got to be careful. You know, before you deny a claim, make sure that you have all the facts. Reasonable investigation. Reasonable. Okay? You got to make sure you did everything you could to get all of the facts. Alright? By the way, that means that you can't just deny claims just because the way the insured talked about the policy, or talked about the claim that they filed, right? So you say, per the insured, they said that XYZ happened and that's not covered. Well, that might be true, but you got to make sure that you're asking the right questions. Because remember, you're the professional, not the insured. My insured filed a wind claim on a water damage. For water damage, right? Guess what? I was a professional. I recognized that. I had to do something about it. Okay? I could have just said, oh, nope, no wind. So since there was no wind, you know, hey, I'm denying this claim. Or I'm you know, lost below the deductible or whatever. Okay? Can't do that. G. Failing to affirm or deny coverage of claims within a reasonable time after having completed its investigation related to such claims or claims. To such claim or claims. Self-explanatory there. You know, once you investigate, you have to, within a reasonable amount of time, provide either settlement or the denial of the claim. Again, each state is different. H. Attempting to settle or settling claims for less than the amount that a reasonable person. Here we go. Attempting to settle or settling claims for less than the amount that a reasonable person would believe the insured or beneficiary was entitled to. Not, it did not say to settle or settling claims for less than the amount that Exactimate or Symbility said was reasonable. Okay? That's why some of this is ambiguous. Now, in theory, Exactimate and Symbility are averages, right? There should be averages for those areas. But, again, you know, you miss a couple line items in a claim that's really $10,000 to get repaired. You miss a couple line items and it's, you know, $7,000 now. Okay? So you got to be careful with that. Now, again, that's not saying that if you mess up, for you new guys, there's things that's missed on estimates all the time, right? And there's some backstops as far as, you know, additional inspections, file reviews, that kind of stuff, right? But the idea here is, hey, in the back of your mind, you need to know that Exactimate and Symbility aren't the law when it comes to what reasonable is. That's usually defined by a court. So you can take your Exactimate estimate, and Exactimate estimates get overturned all the time in court. Okay? So you got to stay reasonable. That's why you have to listen and let the contractor or PA give their side of the story. They still might be wrong, and I'm not saying that you're if they give a different price, you just go with their price. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? What I am saying, though, is you need to let them have a chance to justify why they have in their price what they have. Okay? And then you make that decision from there. Attempting to settle or settling claims based on the basis of an application that was materially altered without notice to or knowledge of consent of the insured. This has to do with changing coverage without giving the insured warning before. So a good example of that is flood coverage. A lot of insurance companies no longer do flood. Well, they had to have a big notice that got sent out saying, hey, we no longer cover flood in our policies. Okay? Because if the insured signed the documents and flood coverage was included, and then all of a sudden the company said, no, it's no longer included, but didn't tell anybody, that company would still be liable for flood. That simple. Okay? K. Unreasonably. Now you notice that the word reasonable is in a lot of these, all right? So we have to maintain reasonability. Unreasonably delaying the investigation or payment of claims by requiring both a formal proof of loss form and a sequential verification that would result in duplication of the same information appearing on the formal proof of loss form. Basically, it's just delaying the claim because, you know, we're making them file a whole bunch of paperwork that's the same, particularly with the proof of loss. Okay? So most policies say that you have to send in a signed proof of loss. That almost never happens, right? But they say that. So basically what insurance companies does is, you know, we'll investigate the claim, and if you didn't send in a proof of loss. But if you try to escalate that to like a attorney or whatever, the first thing they're going to do is do a signed proof of loss, right? Because that's part of the policy. So, but I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is if they send in a signed proof of loss and then you start making them fill out additional paperwork that has the same information on their signed proof of loss, that's illegal. Think of it like this. It bugs the crap out of me. When you file or when you apply for a job, you send in your resume and then they make you fill out all of your job history online. That is the stupidest thing I think ever. It should be one or the other, right? That's kind of what they're talking about here. And all the companies do it. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know who thought that was a smart idea. But anyways, that's just me venting a little bit. Okay. J. Making claim payments to an insured or beneficiary without indicating the coverage under which each payment was made. This is why you have to allocate to either, you know, coverage A, coverage B, coverage C, coverage D, depending on what state you're in, right? What is this coverage going? What limits is this coverage going under, right? So if you're talking about a large loss, if we didn't identify what coverage each line item was going under, what a carrier could do is, you know, oh, they almost busted limits on their contents, and so, you know, we don't tell them that contents is almost busted, and so we're going to put everything else that's not contents related under the contents line item and bust that limit so we don't have to pay, you know, for coverage A or coverage C. Did that make sense to you? It's basically, you know, it gives without making companies identify what coverage each line item goes underneath, it gives them the ability to bust those coverage for line items that don't actually belong underneath that coverage. I guess that's the best way to put it. So can't do that. What was that? J. So K. Unreasonably. There's that word again. Reasonable and unreasonable. Delaying the investigation or payment of claims by requiring... Oh, sorry, we already did that one. Failing claims to deny... Alright. L. Failing in the case of claims denials or offers of compromise settlements to promptly provide a reasonable and accurate explanation of the basis for such actions. Okay? So this has to do with, alright, are we denying a claim? If we're denying a claim, why are we denying the claim? That's why a lot of people have letters that they send out, denial letters. This gives a lot of times denial letters are required by the state. So it gives a reasonable and accurate explanation for the denial. Or if there's a compromise, right? Again, so we have an exact estimate or a stability estimate. Contractor has a different estimate, and we compromise. We're compromising. And if there's something that we are not going to cover on the PA or contractor's estimate, we have to be able to explain why or why not. Okay? M, failing to provide forms necessary to present claims within 15 calendar days of request with a reasonable explanation regarding their use. Okay? Failing to provide forms necessary to present claims within 15 calendar days of the request with a reasonable explanation regarding their use. Idea like this, if there's forms for contents, right? So you have a hurricane that comes through and it destroys a bunch of contents, and there's forms that the insured needs to fill out so that we can get those contents and make coverage payments against that. We have to provide that to the insured, okay? We have to do that within a certain amount of time. So anything that the customer has to do and provide back to us, we have to provide that to them so they can do what they have to do, okay? Contents is a good example there. N, failing to adopt and implement reasonable standards to ensure that the repairs or the repair owed by or required to be used by the insurer are performed in a workmanlike manner. That means, hey, you have one contractor who will do it for, $1,000, and the next contractor will do it for $2,500. You can't just go with the cheapest price. You have to make sure, okay, will that $1,000 get the work done in a workmanlike, means in a reasonably good quality of work fashion? Or is that $1,000 just a fly-by-night handyman who, just got out of jail last week? Okay, so it has to be reasonable. Okay, if $2,500 is reasonable, not the $1,000, you can't just go with $1,000 because it's cheaper. Okay, so there you go, guys. That is the unfair claim settlement practice overview. Curious if you guys have any comments. Go ahead and leave those comments below. If you guys have never, if this is the first time that you guys have ever gone through these, leave a comment below. Just say, hey, this is the first time I ever heard of it. What stood out to you? And let's see what the dialogue turns into. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll talk to you later.